Welcome to another podcast of Indigenous Roots Hoots, a production of the Legacy of Hope Foundation. I'm your host, Gordon Spence, and today my guest is Angela Ashewasegai. Angela is an Ojibwe from the Hendy Inlet First Nation. She is married and has 3 children. She is currently self-employed and works as a certified trauma therapist at Native Angel. Angela is the founder of Sixties Scoop Awareness and a mental health advocate. She's an educator with the platform of raising social awareness about the history of the Sixties Scoop and is dedicated to ending the stigma of mental illness. She also works as an artist, an inspirational speaker, and writer. She has written a compelling memoir which recounts her resilience to survive her loss of identity and child abuse. As a youth, she persevered through the barriers of marginalization and for decades received no treatment for her childhood trauma. Angela Ashewasegai is a trailblazer of overcoming the 60s scoop trauma. Good afternoon, Angela. How are you today?
Good afternoon, Gordon. Nice meeting you.
Yes, nice to see you again. We talked before on other issues. It's really a pleasure to be talking to you again today. Maybe we can start, or you can start by talking a little bit about where you're from, your background, your family, and that sort of stuff.
Okay, thank you, Gordon. Thank you for having me here today. So I'll just start by saying that I'm Ojibwe and I am First Nation, and I was born in Parry Sound. I originally come from Hendy Inlet First Nation, and I've been living off reserve my whole life. My family background is a bit complex because I was a part of the Sixties Scoop. A lot of people listening right now may not know what that is, so I'll just give you a quick definition of the term. The term Sixties Scoop was coined by Patrick Johnston, author of the 1983 report, Native Children and the Child Welfare System. It refers to the mass removal of Aboriginal children from their families into the child welfare system, in most cases without the consent of their families or bands. Furthermore, the 60s Scoop was a continuation of the assimilation policies of the residential school. So with that said, I'm going to just tell you a little bit more about my background. For the record, I don't have any more contact with my non-Indigenous adopted family anymore, and it's because of my health and wellness. They were extremely abusive and racist. Although I was reunited with my biological family in my 20s, it quickly faded into a short-lived happy reunion. I have no more connection with any of my birth family, and it's been a heartbreaking reality. And this is why I titled the memoir Lost Between Two Worlds. I didn't fit in or belong in my Euro-Canadian adopted family, and every time I go to Hendy Inlet First Nation, I don't feel like I fit in there either. I think it's because of our social distancing might have something to do with the multi-generational traumas caused by residential school, Indian day school, and the impacts of the 60s Scoop. Colonial genocide has devastated our lives, and we are all at different stages of healing those traumas. It's really a work in progress. So that's it about my family background.
Before we get into the 60s Scoop and what you are doing right now, maybe we can talk a little bit about your current work and your occupation. What's happening with your life right now?
Okay, so right now I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm self-employed as a certified trauma coach. I work at Native Angel. I created my own business back in 2017. I am very passionate about helping others to find their own pathways towards healing and wellness. Right now, I coach individuals one-to-one with my coaching services in person. I apply IFOT, which is an acronym, which stands for Indigenous Focusing Oriented Therapy. It is a land-based therapy modality. It's a safe therapy process without re-traumatization. So since the COVID pandemic hit us in March, my business has really slowed down a lot. but I'm busy working on other things in the meantime. So what I've been doing ever since the COVID hit, I've been working on creating a few master classes of overcoming complex PTSD is one of them. And I'm also creating another master class, which is called Overcoming Colonial Trauma, to help people with it through an online platform. It's always been my intention to have an online presence. And I think the COVID is actually helping us. We're moving into a new paradigm where, we're all forced to work online right now. So this is where I'm working on right now, is creating these healing programs to work online. I'm very satisfied with my life's purpose of working as a trauma therapist. I've had a very extraordinarily long healing journey of overcoming many barriers before I reached health and wellness. I'm hoping to make a difference to help other people to achieve wellness and success in life in a much shorter time frame. I am also a mental health advocate at Sixties Scoop Awareness. I feel there is a great need to advocate for the cause of ending the stigma of mental illness. I'm working to break down the silence and shame surrounding mental health. The stigma was one of the barriers which held me back from healing my trauma. We all need to talk about our mental health and to normalize. Gordon, did you know that 60 Scoop Awareness is in its 6th year of educating the public about the history of the 60 Scoop?
I did not know that. I know that we do work about creating awareness, such events like the Sixties Scoop and the residential schools and missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. But I was just beginning actually to learn a bit more about the Sixties Scoop in talking to you and other people. And I think Canadian people in general need to hear and understand more about this tragic event in time of Canada. You were a child in the 60s Scoop era. Can you share more about what that was like for you?
So I was scooped away from my birth mother at the hospital. I was placed immediately into foster care for 1 year before being adopted by a Catholic Euro-Canadian family. My father was German descent and my mother was French-Canadian. My childhood was basically stolen. I grew up responding to terrifying experiences of being in a constant fight or flight mode to survive on a daily basis. I didn't know what was going to happen to me. I was stripped of my identity and human dignity. I essentially had no human rights. By the age of 10, I made my first attempt to run away from home, and that didn't work out for me. And I was placed back into my abusive home. And so then the abuse continued after that. I continued to be abused horrifically. And I ran away again at the age of 16. And I ended up in the child welfare system again. I was lost at that time, having no sense of self-awareness or that I was even a victim of child abuse. And I quickly became mentally unstable by surviving with self-destructive coping mechanisms. And I also became a victim of the bureaucracy of the child welfare system and Canada's antiquated and flawed healthcare system. Both of those systems failed me. And so that was one of the, and that's basically amounts to marginalization. All of my child abuse wounds had become faded and invisible through a physical examination at the age of 16. So I had been taken, my life was in a crisis, and they were trying to figure out what was going on. So they put me through a physical examination, which came up with nothing, because all my scars and bruises and cuts and everything else that I had been through for my whole life up to age 16 were just faded scars at that time. So they couldn't determine that I was actually a victim of child abuse.
So let's talk a little bit about that abuse you're talking about.
Yes. I basically It was really horrifying. I was basically physically abused on a daily basis by my non-Indigenous mother, um, and I was also being sexually abused by my older brothers. I had seven, well, myself included. There were seven of us siblings in the family. I was the only one adopted, so the rest of the children were their own offspring. And it was there were five brothers, and out of the five brothers, um, four of them were sexually abusing me. And
Wow.
and then when I reached age 14, my father started sexually abusing me. So that's a really long time of enduring physical and sexual abuse. And so that's basically what was happening to me all through my childhood. It was very difficult and hard to cope with.
How did you manage to get away?
One day I got my report card, and I was in grade 10, and I opened up my report card and I had failing grades. And it was because I had lost all interest in school. I couldn't study and focus. So I was skipping classes and whatnot. So I had this horrible report card, and I knew I couldn't go home because I knew my mother was going to just be livid with me, and I didn't want to face the consequences of her harming me. So I didn't go home, and that's how I ended up in CAS care, because I didn't go home. And
Where did you go?
I stayed outside all night. It was mid-November. My dad was gone hunting, and with this report card, I kind of made it halfway home, but I didn't go all the way home. And I ended up staying kind of like in the outskirts of the town that I lived in. And I just basically went into the woods, and I stayed there all night. And I was very, very lucky that it was a warm night and I didn't freeze. So that's what happened. And the very next day, I ended up getting picked up by a carpool of high school teachers, because I started wandering on the highway. I started wandering down the highway, didn't know where I was going, and suddenly I was picked up by these teachers, and one of them was my neighbor. So when we stopped at the next town, everybody got a car to get coffee, and I wasn't a coffee drinker, so I didn't need anything, despite not eating anything for the last 12 hours or whatever. I'd had nothing to eat, but I didn't want to eat anything. But my neighbor stayed in the car with me, and he asked me where I was going, and I said, I'm going to school. And he says, well, what's going on with you? And I said, I missed my bus, so I'm just hitchhiking to school. And he called me out right away. He says, no, that's not what happened. He said, your parents are worried about you. You're missing. They called me last night. Everyone is looking. They took me to the high school, and right away I went. The CAS launched its investigation right away. The Children's Aid came in. The police came in. So there was a big investigation, police investigation, and going on at the same time as the CAS investigating went on with me. So through that time, they immediately took me to the doctors and examined me from head to toe, and they couldn't see anything wrong with me, because by that time, most of the abuse that had happened to me had already happened, right? And many, many years of physical abuse. So I didn't exhibit any signs or symptoms, or it didn't show on the physical, but it was just mentally.
Did you tell them? Did you tell the authorities that the abuse that you were being inflicted with? Did you make any kind of report to them?
I did give a statement to the police. I did give them a statement, and they were only interested in pursuing sexual abuse allegations with my dad. but they were not interested in anything else I had to say. And I did tell them that I was sexually abused by my brothers. And they said, oh, we really don't want to look at that because they're minors. And for some reason, that's what they said to me. And they were not interested in any of the physical abuse, trauma
Right.
that I had endured for many years from my mother. So I did tell them what had happened.
So did you end up going back there, or did they move you somewhere else?
I was placed in temporary foster care at the time until they determined whether they were going to keep me in care. And so I went through a very stressful time of trying to convince them that I didn't want to go back. I did not want to go back to my so-called home. And they just kept trying to mediate between my parents and me to try and work it out. They were actually trying to work it out. They were trying to say, we're going to try and work this out. We're going to try and fix things so that you can get back home again. And it drove me to the point of threatening harm for them to believe me. And I said, if you put me back there, one of us is going to die. Either I'm going to die or I'm going to kill someone. And that I had to make death threats.
Wow.
To take me seriously. They wouldn't take me seriously. So they finally, another thing that happened was I made a suicide attempt at that time too. My first suicide attempt. And that's when they really started realizing that there was something serious that was going on, that they could be invisible wounds that they could not see. They understood that, okay, there is something going on here. So then they kept me in, they put me in as a permanent ward again at that point.
In a different home?
Yeah, I ended up going through different foster homes for a year.
In a different town also, or in the same town?
Different towns.
How many families did you live with over the years that you were in foster care?
From birth to
till you left.
Well, I know that in the first year of my life before I was adopted, I was moved around 3 times and as an infant before being adopted. And after my crisis of leaving my adopted family, I estimate I must have moved probably once.
I know it must be difficult for you to talk about this, but you've written a book titled Lost Between Two Worlds.
That's right.
How Education and Spirituality Saved One 60s Scoop Survivor, which is you. Can you share some highlights about this book?
Yes, I can. So the first thing that I want to talk about is how education saved my life. I value and support education, and I wish to share one of my favorite quotes. Chief Dan George once said, "I shall grab the instruments of white man's success, his education, his skills, and with these new tools, I shall rebuild my race into the proudest segment of your society." I found that quote at one time, and I don't remember where I found it, but it really resonated with me, and it stuck with me all these years. So when I was a lost youth, struggling with mental health issues, poverty, and marginalization, I didn't know that I was actually planting seeds of my success by pursuing an education. So I wasn't always a success story, Gordon. At age 18, I was a high school dropout with only a grade 10 education. I couldn't focus or concentrate on my studies while coping with the effects of social injustices. So I survived hard times working minimum wage jobs and living hand to mouth. It was a stressful lifestyle of instability with ongoing homelessness and untreated mental illness. I was all alone, and I desperately clung to hope. Somehow I was self-motivated to take action because I believed that I deserved a better life. So I went back and finished high school, and then I went on to take 2 years of college. I gained some stability when I moved to Ottawa in 1988. I had a better resume with some higher education on it, and new doors opened up for me. I earned my first desk job in the government with a decent salary and benefits. So education does make a difference. That's what I saw at that time in my life. I was like, wow, that's really awesome. I did something good for myself by going back to school. I also became involved with my culture too at that time. I began to learn about my culture, and I participated in traditional teaching circles and lots of traditional healing ceremonies. My spirituality and identity grew quickly, and I learned more about who I was by doing that. But I wasn't done with school yet. I had the dream of writing a book of my harrowing life experience, and I decided I needed more education to do that. But before I did all that, I worked in the government from 1990 to 2002. And in that time frame, I had 3 children. So in 2002, I resigned from the government because I wanted to pursue a university education. And in 2002, I went to university, which helped me to begin unraveling what had happened to me and my birth family. I started learning about the effects of residential school, not so much about the Sixties Scoop at that time. Back then, everything was in school, the research was centralized around the residential school. And I was really hoping I could find stuff about the Sixties Scoop, but I couldn't find anything because when I was doing my research papers and assignments and so on, when you're asked to choose a research topic, I was always wanting to do something about the Sixties Scoop. But I mean, I had my own take on it, but there was nothing to back me up, if you know what I mean, because you have to have your backup sources to back up your arguments. So I couldn't find anything to corroborate, my arguments. So I found that very frustrating in university at the time, but I did learn a lot about residential school. But also at that time, I also learned that I was a 60 Scoop survivor at that time, at the very same time in 2002. So up to that point in my life, like we're talking, I'm in my 40s at that time. And that's a really long time not understanding what had happened to me. So I had just learned, I had written a piece of writing for an anthology called Book of Voices. And it was stories about Aboriginal adoptees. So I answered the call to that. And I didn't know that was about, that there were others like me. So when I submitted my piece of writing, I was really shocked when I got the anthology a couple of months later, like around Christmas time. And one day I got it in the mail, and it was a book of 40 voices of 60 Scoop survivors, including my own. And I was really horrified that they didn't edit any of my work, because they totally took the work as it was, because it was basically valuing the voice of oral storytelling, kind of like that, right? They don't want to edit your voice in any way. They want to keep your voice authentic. So when I sent my piece of writing into them, I was convinced that they were going to edit it. But it wasn't edited, and I understand now why they did not do that, because they didn't want to take away anything. So university educated me about Indigenous issues and social injustices, which gave me a new perspective about the social distance gap separating me from my birth family. Learning about residential school and intergenerational trauma, I began to make sense of all the tragedies, the many untimely deaths of my birth family members, the pain and suffering of family violence. In my birth family, there was a lot of family violence. It was all so shocking for me when I first met my family in my 20s, because they told me about all of these tragedies, and I couldn't make sense of it at the time. It did, but when I went to university, I was able to go, aha, now I understand, right? I didn't know anything about residential school in my 20s. I didn't know anything about the 60s. So when I went to university, I was able to start unraveling this whole thing of why I wasn't seeming to be able to connect with my family. They had a lot of trauma and pain and suffering. And when I had my own pain and suffering, I was overwhelmed with what they had gone through. So I kept socially distant because I needed to take care of myself and my own trauma. And I'm speaking only from my point of view, like from my side of why we have this gap between us. And I was staying away because I was still hurting from all of my own trauma that was untreated, still untreated in my 40s. I still had no treatment of trauma at that time. And so that was why I stayed away from my birth family, because I had to hold myself up. I didn't want to carry their trauma and carry my own. So that's
Right.
kind of like how I explain it from my point. So I want to go into now, I want to just talk about how spirituality saved my life a little bit, because that's a little bit, that goes into my book. The other thing that I need to mention about my book is that this is only the tip of the iceberg of what I talk about with you right now. There was so much going on with social issues going on in my life, but I'm just basically only sharing the tip of the iceberg with you. So how spirituality saved my life. During my adult life cycle, I learned about the importance of our culture's spirituality, which put a few things about my life into a new perspective. As a child, I grew up in a terrifying world of physical and sexual violence, and I couldn't stay inside my body. As a result, trauma had given me the gift of becoming an empath, which is really psychic ability. When I was a girl, I was experiencing some pretty scary experiences while living in my abusive home. I had this sense of the sixth sense. So there was spirits in the home, and they were bothering me and making me feel uncomfortable all the time. And I didn't know anything about psychic ability. Like, I was just a child at the time, didn't know anything about being psychic. And I also had my first terrifying vision at age 5. And I didn't know anything about Native spirituality, and there was no one around to teach me about Native spirituality or what it was like to be psychic, if you were a psychic. Like I was, and I didn't know it, but I just was dealing with all these scary experiences at the same time as the abuse that was going on. So I was living in a very terrified time. I grew up in a farming community, so it was normal for me to see bears, wolves, snakes, and in particular spiders. I was in awe of the natural world, but only from a safe distance, as you can imagine. So when I gained stability in 1988, when I moved to Ottawa, I began to have nightmares. And I didn't know that nightmares were actually part of the healing process of trauma. I nearly died of another suicide attempt, but the spirit world decided that it wasn't my time. I continued to have nightmares, but then I began to write journals about my dreams, and I began to find an interest in dream interpretation at that time. The animal world came in to help me through my dreams, if you can imagine that. And they were coming in to help me to resolve unprocessed trauma. I did a lot of emotional releasing with my buried memories and repressed suffering. So it came through an unconscious processing trauma. And I noticed the trend of animals appearing in my nightmares, and they were actually representing my abusers. And I began to study animal totems and their medicines at that time. So that was really a very important part of my healing, of self-healing. Like, without getting help from anywhere else, I was being helped through my dreams from the spirit world. The spirit world came in, and the way they could connect with me was through my dreams. So the animal world came to me in my dreams to save me. So I overcame being the most vulnerable, marginalized member of society because my education and spirituality saved my life.
Amazing. I just wanted to back up a little bit. You talked about when you were going through trauma and living in this house, and you said you felt spirits. Was this before the nightmares of the animals coming to you, or was this separate? Was it like ghosts and stuff like that you hear about?
As a child, I was very energy sensitive because I had actually my third eye chakra had opened up because I couldn't stay inside my body. I was dissociating all the time. I had to dissociate. It's called dissociation, but I was dissociating from such an extreme level that my spirit was able to leave my body. So I'd stay inside of it. The abuse was so harsh and so extreme.
Your inner spirit of who you are was so traumatized.
I had to leave my body to survive. And then what happens is when you do that, it basically activated my third eye chakra. Now, for people that are spiritual out there will understand what that is.
What do you call it? A third eye?
Third eye. It's your third eye. It's your intuition. We all are intuitive. Everyone is intuitive, but it's like a muscle. When the more you use it, the stronger it gets. So my intuition was very, very strong as a child because I couldn't stay in my body, so I became psychic. And then I was very terrified of the spirits that were haunting me.
Wow.
When I would go to bed at night, there was always these entities that were making me uncomfortable.
Was this when you were awake?
Yes, I was awake. And it would only happen when I would go to bed at night. Feel like there were spirits in my room, but I couldn't see them, but I could feel them. I knew they were there.
Has this ability, like, it almost sounds like you're gifted with something special, and which has helped you persevere the trauma you went through, and the animals coming to you in your dreams and helping you get out of this, help you heal through this trauma that you're going through. Has this ability helped you become who you are today in your work as a trauma counselor?
Yes, very much so. It's basically shaped me who I am today because I have the ability to see spirits. Like I can see them now. I couldn't see them when I was a girl. I couldn't see the spirits, but I evolved and now I can see them. So I can see them. I really know when the ancestors come in. Like I can feel them when they come in now. And in fact, I had an ancestor come and visit me last night. That was very beautiful. So in terms of coming as a therapist, I work with the clients from knowing whether they're working with ancestral trauma or intergenerational or their own lived experience with trauma. I'm able to discern what level of trauma am I working with. Is it vicarious? Is it and because of my ability and my training, I'm able to help whether we're dealing with ancestral trauma, because we all store trauma in our bodies. When we've been traumatized, we carry the trauma in our bodies. So it needs to be witnessed and validated. So when I work with one-to-one with clients, if I'm able to help through my psychic ability, I'm able to help them work on what level this trauma is coming through them. Like is it coming from them themselves, or is it coming from an intergenerational? Well, yeah. So yes, it's been able to help me to work with my career.
Yeah, you're a certified trauma therapist at Native Angel. Native Angel is your business that you created, and is that like when you do counseling, do you incorporate any Native spirituality components to it?
Absolutely. It's a land-based modality that I offer, and also what I also offer is alternative holistic approaches to healing. because in my life a lot of my um, healing and wellness has come from alternative healing modalities. And so there are many tools to help people through their processing of trauma, where there's so many different ways. And I'm able to offer them a tool basket, if you will, and I just present the different types of healing modalities that there is, and help them work with what works with them. So I help
Right.
them to choose their own pathway. Um, I don't know their pathway. They choose what resonates with them. There's things such as sound healing. There's many different healing modalities that I have to offer, along with my Indigenous tools as well.
This next question is about reconciliation. Do you have a message for Canadians about reconciliation? How it can make Canada a better country?
Yes, my message for Canadians are we must all continue to work together at the process of reconciliation through the tool of education. I want to first just say that everyone matters. As an educator of the Sixties Scoop, I know that Canadians have an interest about the history of colonization and Indigenous issues. I know that because I have spoken to Canadians who commonly wonder why they never heard of the Sixties Scoop or residential school system during their educational path. When I began Sixties Scoop awareness 6 years ago in response to the reality that nobody seemed to know anything about the Sixties Scoop, it came to my attention because whenever I met new people in my life, I would end up informing them that I was a 60 Scoop survivor, and they didn't know what that was all about. And the reason why I told them I was a 60 Scoop survivor, because when you introduce your roots and that, I would always come out with, I have two families. First of all, I was adopted, and I had, my adopted family, and then I also have my birth family, and then out from that would come the 60 Scoop, and then they would go, well, what is that? And then I would end up explaining that. So that kept happening like all the time to me, and I recognized that, wow, nobody knows about the 60 Scoop. So then I went online and I started searching online if there's anything on the internet about 60 Scoop, and there was nothing online. And that's when I decided, well, I think I might as well just start raising awareness about this Indigenous issue. And that's when I started a 60 Scoop awareness to raise awareness about this Indigenous issue. So I also realized that racism is still alive and well in Canada. And I know that Indian stereotypes can be unlearned. And I have a story to share about that because I know that it can be unlearned. There was a time in my life when I was racist towards my own people. And I know that sounds crazy. I mean, how can one person be racist against your own people? Well, I can tell you why that happened. I grew up learning about Indian stereotypes. My family was racist. As a result of the stereotypes that they made, teaching me that Indian people are all those negative stereotypes, I became ashamed of being a Native person. And I hid my true identity after that. So I started hiding my identity in around age 19, 18, 19. I started hiding my true identity. So I started perming my hair and dyeing it any color but black. So I went through that period, and I wore a lot of makeup. I wore a lot of fashionable clothes, and I fooled everyone that I wasn't a Native person. I would shock people when I would tell them that I was Native, and they go, "No way, you're not Native." And I was like so proud of myself. I'm like, "Oh my God, I fooled everybody." And then I would shock them, and they'd go, "Wow, that was so impressive." There was a time in my life when I was in a homeless crisis, and I stayed in a Native women's shelter for a few months. At first, I was prejudiced and judgmental because of learned racism. So all the women that were at the shelter, I thought I was better than everyone. I thought I was above them. I was looking down at everybody because I was already carrying like the stereotypes in my head. Like I was thinking like, oh, these people are just all, lazy and all those negative stereotypes I had learned. But then after staying there for a few months, I learned the truth because I was being treated well and I was respected and I was valued for the first time in my life. I had a moment of weighing the differences of Indian stereotypes versus being treated good and for my wellness. And I kind of had this to weigh it out because I had like this moment of questioning what are my values, what are my beliefs here, because I was taught that all these horrible things about Native, but then when I lived with them, they weren't at all those. I learned that my parents were wrong about Indians. So it was like an epiphany moment in my life. So I felt this moment where maybe there's nothing wrong with Native people, and furthermore, maybe there's nothing wrong with me. But then there was it was like this huge moment in my life where I realized that my parents were wrong. And it was like a turning point, it was like a huge turning point. So my message is that Native stereotypes can be unlearned.
The last part of Indigenous Roots and Hoots is, Aboriginal people and are funny people. We like to tell jokes and tell funny stories. In your life, I'm not sure how much Aboriginal humor you come across, maybe more recently in the years. I wonder, you got a funny story for us or a joke to kind of end this broad podcast?
Well, I can just say that I never lost my sense of humor. Once I started realizing like my identity that I'm Ojibwe, and I always found everything funny. Like I always found a lot of humor in my life, even when I was growing up in school and stuff. I would laugh and disrupt a class because the teachers would always have to tell me to pay attention and stop being disruptive with my laughing. Also, I could also maybe go back to talking about when I first returned to my native roots. One of the things that I had to adjust to was learning that thing called Indian time. So that was one of the shocking things that I had to deal with when I first came back to my native roots. Whenever I went to an Indigenous event, I was always frustrated when things didn't start on time. So because I was used to moving in a fast pace, always in a hurry, and always used to having quick results for everything. But that's not the way for Native people, right? So there are many differences. It was like almost like a culture shock. So I had to adapt to that. Like it was, so I had to learn that, when they say something's going to start at this time, it's actually going to start maybe an hour later or 2 hours later. So I found that really frustrating when I first came back to my roots. Yeah. So Indian time was like a joke, right? So people would say, it's Indian time, Angela. You just got to understand the Indian time, right? And so that was one of the things that I had to adjust to. And anyway, I can laugh about that now. But at the time, it wasn't funny at the time, but I can laugh at it now for sure.
Yeah, it's real. It's real.
It is real. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've been talking to Angela Ashewasegai, Ojibwe. She's a certified trauma therapist. This is called Native Angel. She started in the 90s. She's also written a book called Lost Between Two Worlds, a 60 Scoop survivor's journey of self-discovery. Thank you, Angela, for taking the time to talk to us today, and I wish you well in your continued work at Native Angel. And do you have a website, Native Angel? Maybe give you a plug here.
Well, unfortunately I don't have a website up yet, but there will be very soon. I am working on the website content right now. Right. So I think everything's going to just pop up soon. Like if anybody wants to look up 60 Scoop Awareness, that's on Facebook. And there is a website for that. There's 60scoopawareness.com. So for myself, if anybody wants to find me with my Native Angel, there is a Native Angel Facebook page. anybody wants to get in contact with me.
Okay. Egosima. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Roots and Hoots is produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. For more podcasts like this, please visit our website at legacyofhope.ca.